American Express just made some drastic changes to the Platinum Card. There are some winners, especially on team travel, but I think most people will be angry. We'll look at these changes and what it means for us, why it happened, and also how you can play this. Pretty much what a credit card expert would do. Big favor before we dive in is to give this a thumbs up to help the algorithm, that way it gets boosted, and people that need to see this can see this. Also, if you are new, consider subscribing. We're very slowly working towards 300k subs. Okay, starting with the elephant in the room, let's talk intro bonuses. They've updated the terms and it's not for the better. You may not be eligible for the welcome offer if you have or have had this card, the Platinum for Charles Schwab, the Platinum for Morgan Stanley, or previous versions of these cards. In the past, all three of these cards were considered separate products, meaning that you could get each of the bonuses. Even though the cards were very similar for bonus purposes, they were different. In effect, we now have a one platinum rule. Okay, so why is this happening? Pretty obvious, since the optimal strategy is to get all three of these cards and to maximize the intro bonuses. The reason being that intro bonuses generally represent something like 20 to 80% back as a return on spend. If you think of categories as minor changes, this is pulling giant levers. For anyone that's been in the rabbit hole like me, you probably have or have had the Vanilla, the Morgan Stanley, Charles Schwab, Mercedes-Benz, and maybe even the Ameriprise. Okay, so how should you play this? Not much we can do for this specific situation, but the general practice is to apply for a new card every 2 to 3 months. We did a video on this earlier this week and how I would play this in 2023. The idea being that issuers tend to add more rules rather than remove rules. So for example, as much as I like cards like Built, unless they're giving you an intro bonus, it doesn't really make sense and I'd rather focus on other cards and other intro bonuses. There is one potential big brain strategy, but it does feel like a crapshoot. American Express proper doesn't have an incentive to give you an intro bonus if you're already in their ecosystem. In tech or business or startup terms, you're already a monthly active user, you're activated. Even though they can make more money from you, they're not really trying as hard to pull you over. On the other hand, there's a non-zero chance that Morgan Stanley or Charles Schwab would want to incentivize you. I think it's doubtful, but there is a world out there where they maybe have a bonus waiver if you have enough AUM. Probably wishful thinking. The other consideration is going to be retention offers. American Express will oftentimes give you points or sometimes cash or an annual fee waiver to entice you to keep the card. Same thing with Comcast and any other service. Since it's a lot more expensive to bring you in as a new customer, they want to retain you and they have a budget for that. For credit cards and specifically American Express, you can generally do this every other year. Also, it's not guaranteed, but there are a ton of data points. Taking a look at Flyer Talk for 2023, we see one data point for Schwab and one for Morgan Stanley. The Schwab one sounds pretty good and the Morgan Stanley one sounds okay. Taking a look at the non-co-branded Platinum Card, there's 21 data points ranging from 25k to 55k. Obviously, there probably are more people with the normal Platinum compared to variants and co-branded ones. I wouldn't treat this as a percentage, but it's still insightful. Another big consideration is incentives. It's reasonable to think that American Express has more incentive to retain and keep someone that they fully own compared to a co-branded card. With a non-co-branded card, American Express owns 100% of the interchange fee. If they give you a 50k point retention offer, they're keeping 100% of those swipe fees. With co-branded cards, they give a percentage of that swipe fee to the partner. The reason being that you're using their brand and you're also tapping into their user base. So for example, Delta, who also partners with American Express, made $5.5 billion in 2022 through this partnership. With a co-branded card, and these are just example numbers, let's say American Express owns 75% of the interchange fees. So would they pay the same 50k to only have 75% of the swipe fees instead of 100? My other fear, and it seems pretty reasonable, is that American Express has outs. So partners like Schwab already have waivers for that annual fee. For example, if you have more than $250k in assets with them, then you receive a $100 card statement credit. If you have more than $1 million, it's $200, and then more than $10 million, it's $200, and also $800 cash bonus into your brokerage account. Is there a world where you call American Express for a retention offer and they kick the ball to Schwab? Given all of this, I would love your thoughts on why you think this is happening and also what you would do. The next obvious question is which of these cards is the best one. For retention offers, I'd probably say the vanilla no co-branded one. For Schwab, I think it makes sense if you're going for those appreciation credits, and the Morgan Stanley if you care about the authorized user superpower. And we'll get into that with the second change. Another big consideration is elevated offers. Historically, Schwab and Morgan Stanley don't have elevated offers because they haven't needed to. On the other hand, the non-co-branded vanilla card gets a ton of offers, whether mailers, referrals, or card match. In fact, I'd argue that the best way to start with American Express is via card match for that elevated platinum offer. Rationale being that it's a lot harder to get when you become a customer, so you generally want to start with that. I know it sounds weird and it's non-intuitive, but mathematically, it's the best move. I'll put a blog post down below walking through card match to see if you're targeted. or you can Google Ask Sebi card match and it should pop up. Regardless of which one you go for, make sure that the card makes sense and that the math works out. We do have a platinum calculator as well that you can find, and the idea is that you can punch in your own numbers and how you value different credits and how much spend you're going to do. That way you can make an educated decision based off the facts. It's a nice card and I get value, but maybe you don't. On that note, if you want to learn about the Platinum or pretty much any other card out there and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, asksebi.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the offers are competitive, that the cards make sense for you, but otherwise it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. The second major change is going to be annual fees for authorized users. In the past, you can add up to 3 authorized users for only $175. So whether you added 1, 2, or 3, it was still $175 in total. The annual fee has jumped up to $195 for each additional Platinum card, making it substantially more expensive. They also added a new card called the Companion Platinum Cards. From my understanding and looking online, this is just a rebrand of the Gold card that came with the Platinum that had no perks. Back in the day, it was very confusing because you could add unlimited gold authorized user cards. People would think that it was like the normal gold card, even though it had no perks. The Platinum Gold authorized user cards were different than the gold cards. I'm a fan of this change because I think a lot of people would get confused and would love to argue with me about it for some reason. Okay, so who does this affect? Pretty much anyone that would add up to 1, 2, or 3 authorized users, and generally people that were sharing lounge access. For example, let's say you have the card and your player 2 travels with you. Back in the day, financially, there was a number that made sense. There is an exception to this and we'll get into it. The interesting thing though is that I don't think a lot of people who had 2 players, so adding only 1 person, were doing this. If anything, it was probably people adding 3 people, which brings up the question whether this is more targeted towards families and people maybe bringing in multiple guests. So why is this happening? Despite the changes that they've tried to make, the lounges are still pretty full. In the past, you were allowed to have free guests, and that's not the case anymore. And to Amex's credit, they have been aggressively trying to grow their lounges. For example, SFO felt very tiny before. It feels about 3 times larger now, even though I think the space-wise only doubled. We've walked up and gone in without any problems, and we've probably done that about 7 to 8 times for 2023. If we're flying Delta, then we generally go to the Delta Sky Club, and Lark Creek, which is a Party Pass restaurant for an omelet or a burger if we don't feel like walking over and we're in T2. SFO has been mostly fine, but other airports have been a mess. The last 2 times we tried for JFK, it was a 30-minute wait, and we just decided to walk to Delta. Same thing with LAX multiple times, it's just a lot of people, and the Delta Sky Club is a lot nicer, and I think the food's also a lot better. Vegas has been fine for the most part, maybe a 15-minute wait sometimes, but I guess it depends on when you're going as well. The Vegas Centurion Lounge is probably my favorite of the bunch given the food. Basically, there's a lot of people at the card who are not happy with the current status at the lounges, so American Express is trying to fix this, that way people don't cancel their cards. Okay, so what can Amex do to alleviate this? Number 1, lower the number of authorized user cards, which is already happening. Number 2, add more lounges, which is also happening. Number 3 is to increase the annual fee, and I think that's going to happen a bit later. The reason being that American Express has been on a 4-year upgrade cycle, so it makes sense. Back in 2017, they added the Uber and the tax credit, making the card a lot more interesting for tech people and just younger people. So I skipped the card before because I wasn't breaking even from the credits, and now there were more credits and I use Uber. 4 years later in 2021, the fee jumped all the way up to $6.95, but ironically, it got even better. So for a lot of people, the people that American Express was targeting, it now became a keeper card due to the credits. It might not be you or someone else you know, but there's a lot of people that pay for Equinox that already use a lot of these services. Before the shutdowns, Equinox had 350,000 members, and if anything, I feel like this number has increased. I don't go to Equinox, but for the people that I know that do, they've complained that it's been more full and it feels more crowded. Kind of like Centurion lounges. As much as some of us seem to hate the coupon book, the average person that they're targeting loves it. For example, last year, American Express doubled the number of Platinum Card members, with a lot of it being millennials and Gen Z. Given the timing and the fact that people are happy to pay, I wouldn't be surprised if we see an annual fee increase in 2025. One of the other options that you're probably thinking about is lounge limits. I can talk more about this in the future and the psychology, but I think in general, the way you're thinking about it is a bad idea. So instead of having unlimited visits, maybe you're only allowed 2 or 3 visits per year. Even though it sounds good, the problem is that it kills the dream. Their goal is to find as many people that want to travel, that aspire to travel every month or every week, but who don't actually do it. Setting a cap ends up ruining the dream, and even though it might actually solve the problem, it means that they have less card members and less revenue, so it's a net negative. If it doesn't make sense, the best example to think of is a gym membership. If they said that you could only go once a week, they're probably going to have less members. For the gym, their goal is to find people that think that they're going to work out every day, but ideally don't show up. It's the idea that they can work out and get value if they wanted to, but that they don't. Okay, but how should you play this? What should you do? I think if you have two people, especially if you have a player 2 that already uses those credits, then it might make sense to get a second Platinum card. I know it sounds aggressive, but if you do travel together, I'd recommend running the numbers and seeing if the math works out. For example, 200 in Uber, 100 in Saks, 200 airline incidental, and the $200 hotel credit are all pretty easy to use. Airline incidental if you know what you're doing, and we talked about that in the 19 things to do Platinum video. That's already $700 in credits. The digital entertainment one might be a bit tougher, but I think it's still pretty easy for the first 2 to maybe 4 cards. And that's before considering the other credits like Equinox. Okay, but what if I don't want that? That sounds crazy. I don't want to have 2 Platinum cards and pay 2 big annual fees. Also, I don't want to pay the $195 because that sucks. In that case, the Morgan Stanley Platinum is the answer. So with that version of the card, you can add 1 additional Platinum card member for no additional fee. After the first one, it's the same $195. If you have a player 2 that can't justify their own Platinum card, then this seems like the easy winner, at least on paper. Note that American Express has made it a lot tougher to get this card. In the past, it was pretty easy, but had some hoops. Now there's a lot more hoops. Let me know if you want me to cover this more in a future video, but it's not as easy as just going on a website and applying. In most cases, you're probably locking up a chunk of money. Card-wise, it's exactly the same, but has a little Morgan Stanley symbol at the top. In my case, my mom travels 3 to 4 times a year and oftentimes goes to Hong Kong. So she travels, she benefits from lounge access, but she doesn't want to deal with the coupon book and doesn't want to deal with credits. In this case, it's a lot easier for me to add her as an authorized user rather than for her to have a card and then for me to deal with credits. It's also nice that Hong Kong has a Centurion lounge and she seems to like that lounge. Okay, so what would Sebi do? Long term, if you have a player 2, either get a second Platinum card or look into the Morgan Stanley Platinum. One thing I started wondering is why is this suddenly happening? My guess is that a lot of it has to do with the stock price and also incentives. Even though we like to think about companies as long-term, a lot of financial performance, and especially bonuses, are based off the short term. If you have a bad year, then you might not get the bonus that you're hoping for, and if it's a very bad year, then your head is on the chopping block. Same thing with basketball and any other sports, people's memories are very short. In the last month, Amex stock price has dropped by almost 10%. If they're bleeding right now, they might be looking for any bandage. A big belief is downside risk, especially for younger card members who might have their cash flow impacted due to student loan repayments restarting this fall. Okay, but isn't that affecting everyone? So if you look at Chase for the same period, they're only down 3%. If you comp it against other payment networks like Visa, they're only down about 1.4. Same thing with MasterCard, down about 1.4. If you look at the S&P 500, they're down about 4%. So not only is American Express underperforming their peers, they're also underperforming the market. And kind of funny because their peers are doing better than the market. Even longer term, you see the same problem. So 6 months out, Amex is down about 7.4%. Compare this to the market that's up 9.3%, so an 18% difference. For the 1-year chart, Amex is down 2.5%, while the market is up 2%, about a 4.5% difference. Either way you slice it, it's not ideal and not a good picture. For the intro bonus one, they're lowering their marketing cost, and then for the authorized user one, it's cash infusion. Also in the long run, they'll have less people canceling their cards due to not being happy with the lounge, so net good, or at least that's my guess. Side note, if you do want to try out a new brokerage, Moomoo is giving up to 15 free stocks and a share of Tesla or Google. There are different deposit levels, but pretty much the same idea as intro bonuses that we talk about of credit cards. You can get rewarded for trying something. Note that Moomoo is a registered broker and regulated by FINRA. They're also a member of SIPC, so your assets are covered for up to $500K and up to $250K for cash. Link down below if you want to check it out and get up to 15 free stocks. It does help a ton and allows me to focus on this credit card rabbit hole. Last change is a pretty small one, and that's going to be a vendor for the digital entertainment credit. The Platinum card comes with a $20 per month digital entertainment credit, totaling $240 per year. Eligible subscriptions include Disney+, the Disney Bundle, ESPN+, Hulu, the New York Times, Peacock, and also SiriusXM. Audible is now leaving, and they're adding the Wall Street Journal. I talked about this in the 19 things to do for the Platinum card video, but I would personally go for the Disney Bundle given the value. Alternatively, maybe go for Hulu and then add in Max. If your player 2 also has a Platinum card, then this might be a good split. Okay, so why is this happening? Vendors change, Audible probably hit their budget, and they're moving on. How would I play this? If you care about Audible, then keep using Audible until they're not a partner anymore, and then afterwards, switch accounts or make sure to turn it off. If you care about the Wall Street Journal, then use your Platinum card for Wall Street Journal. Pretty straightforward compared to the other two. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, asksebi.com, and also down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave an airplane emoji in the comments down below, and I'll try to heart it and also respond. My questions for you is number 1, what are your thoughts on the intro bonus rule change, and is it something that impacts you? Were those other Platinum cards on your list, or would you never have gotten them anyways? Number 2, what about the authorized user card fee change? Are you impacted or not as much? 3, do you think it's financial related, or do you think there's something else in the back end? And lastly, do you prefer Audible or Wall Street Journal, or which service do you use? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favorite, thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise hope you guys liked it. See you guys next time.